At my husband's funeral, as I stood by his coffin, my phone buzzed. One message. 3 words. It said, "I am still alive. Trust no one." For a moment, I thought my eyes had betrayed me. My hands, already trembling from grief, nearly dropped the phone into the bouquet of white lilies I held. The room was spinning. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echoing louder than the organ music. I gasped, loud enough that the woman beside me, my neighbor Clara, turned and whispered, "Are you all right, dear?" All right, how could I be? My husband of 47 years lay cold in a coffin before me, his face powdered and still. And yet, that message, his number, his words. My knees buckled. I clutched the pew for balance. Around me, people stared. I heard them mutter, "She's too old. She doesn't know what she's saying." Poor thing, grief is breaking her mind. I wanted to scream that I wasn't crazy, that the message was real. But the phone burned in my hand and fear sealed my lips. What if I was losing my mind? What if this was some cruel trick? I stared at the coffin, his lips sewn shut, his skin waxy. Was it truly him? Or had someone made me bury a stranger? Tears blurred my vision. My son came over, patted my arm, and whispered, "Sit down, Mom. Don't make a scene." His words were sharp under the sugar. My daughter-in-law nodded, eyes cold. I looked back at the screen. The message hadn't vanished. "I am still alive. Trust no one." A shiver crawled up my spine. If he was alive, then who was in that coffin? And if he wasn't, who wanted me to believe he was? That day, at my husband's funeral, I thought grief was my enemy. But I was wrong. My enemy was standing much closer, smiling at me, whispering comfort, while burying the darkest secret of my life. That day at the funeral, staring at that message, I thought my life had already reached its cruelest twist. But the truth is, betrayal had been weaving itself into my life long before that coffin closed. I just hadn't seen it clearly. I was a wife for 47 years, a mother for over 4 decades, and for most of my life I believed in sacrifice. I believed that love meant giving, even when it left you empty. I still remember our first apartment. It was 1978, the year we married. A cramped 1-bedroom walk-up with water stains on the ceiling and rent at $700 a month, which at that time felt like a mountain on our shoulders. I worked nights at the diner pouring coffee for truck drivers, my hands raw from washing dishes. He worked construction, his back bent, his hands calloused. We scraped and saved every penny, eating canned soup 3 nights a week, so we could tuck away a few dollars in a coffee tin marked future. I believed in that word, future. For me, it meant a home of our own, a place where our children could laugh without the neighbors banging on the walls, where we could breathe without counting coins at the grocery store. And slowly we made it, piece by piece, a better job for him, overtime shifts for me. By 1985, we bought our first little house. 3 bedrooms, chipped paint, but it was ours. I still remember painting those walls a pale yellow, the smell of fresh paint mixing with the smell of formula and baby powder when our first son was born. Oh, those years. They were hard, but they were full. We were a family. I cooked every night, even when my legs ached. He read the paper at the table, the kids squabbling over crayons, laughter mixing with the clatter of dishes. Those memories are carved into my heart. But love and sacrifice have a way of hiding the cracks. I didn't see how slowly, over the decades, my giving became expected, how my exhaustion was dismissed, how I became the backbone, while others leaned so hard that I could no longer stand straight. By the 1990s, money was tighter again. College fees, $25,000 for our daughter's tuition. Medical bills when my husband had that back surgery. I picked up extra shifts, sometimes 3 doubles in a row, until my hands shook pouring coffee, and my boss told me to sit down before I collapsed. But when tuition checks cleared, when the mortgage was paid, I told myself it was worth it. Because wasn't this what family was for? To give, to endure, so the next generation could climb higher? Yet gratitude fades faster than bills. My children grew. but their warmth grew colder. I noticed it in small ways at first. The hurried phone calls, the excuses not to visit. My husband became distant too. He no longer looked at me across the dinner table with tired love. His eyes were elsewhere, guarded, secretive. And I told myself it was me. I was aging. I was less interesting. Perhaps I had become invisible in my own home. But whispers are hard to ignore. I once passed by the kitchen door and heard my daughter-in-law hissing to my son, "The house will be ours one day. Don't let her waste it." Another time I saw papers on the counter, the word inheritance scrawled at the top. When I asked, they snapped, "Mom, you're imagining things." Imagining. That word was used against me so often it began to stick. Yet I couldn't shake the changes. My husband, who once laid every paycheck in my hands for safekeeping, began locking drawers, answering phone calls in the garage, trips out of town with no explanation. When I asked, his tone sharpened. "Don't start, woman. Don't ask questions." The man I had given my life to, who I had stitched shirts for when he couldn't afford new ones, who I had sat by through fevers and layoffs, now looked at me as though I were a burden. And the children followed his lead. Where once they clung to me, they now rolled their eyes, whispering that I was forgetful, that I was too old to handle money. They laughed when I misplaced my keys. They sighed when I asked about the bills. I brushed it off at first, told myself it was normal. Generations change. Parents become less important. Children grow wings. But there was something sharper underneath. A hunger, a greed. I overheard them one Christmas when they thought I was asleep in the next room. My son said, "If Dad goes first, Mom can't manage alone. We'll have to take control." My daughter replied, "The property is worth a fortune. Don't let her sign it away." I pressed my pillow against my face that night to muffle the sobs. It's a strange thing, to realize that the people you love most see you not as a person but as an obstacle, that your years of sacrifice don't inspire gratitude, but calculation. By the time I turned 70, I was no longer the mother who held their hands crossing the street. I was a liability, an old woman in the way of what they believed was theirs. And my husband, his distance became a chasm. I saw bank letters addressed to him that he hid, insurance forms I had never signed. He began sleeping in the guest room, telling me it was for his back pain. But I knew better. His eyes never met mine. His hands no longer reached for me. Sometimes, at night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering the man I married in that tiny apartment in 1978, the one who promised me we would build a life together. I wondered if that man had ever truly existed, or if he had been replaced years ago by someone colder, someone who saw me only as a means to an end. So when that message came at the funeral, "I am still alive. Trust no one," part of me wasn't surprised. Shocked, yes. Shaken to my core. But surprised? No. Because deep down, I had known for years that lies were already rotting the foundation of my family. It was as if the coffin wasn't the beginning of betrayal, but the final stone laid on top of years of secrets I had refused to see. And now, as I look back at all the decades of sacrifice, the $700 rent, the $25,000 tuition, the overtime, the meals skipped, the tears swallowed, I realized the truth was far crueler than poverty, far crueler than hardship. The truth was that I had been living beside betrayal for years, and everyone I thought I could trust had already begun burying me alive. The funeral ended, but the unease inside me did not. That message, "I am still alive, trust no one," didn't vanish like some hallucination. It stayed on my phone, staring back at me each time I dared to look, like a whisper that refused to fade. For days after, I couldn't sleep. I would wake up in the dark, clutching the phone to my chest, replaying those words over and over. Was I losing my mind? Was grief making me see ghosts in pixels? Or had my husband really staged his own death? I tried to dismiss it, but then the strangeness began. A week after the burial, I went looking for the will. My husband had once told me years ago that he'd drawn one up with the lawyer in town. Everything goes to you first, he had said, sliding a file into the desk drawer. The children will have their share when the time comes, but you'll be taken care of. Yet when I searched, the folder was gone. Drawer empty. Dusty, but no papers. I asked my son about it. He gave me a look, the kind a parent gives a child who's asked something silly. Mom, you must be mistaken. Dad didn't leave a will. If he did, the lawyer would have said something. But I knew. I had seen the folder. I remembered the weight of it, the smell of the ink. That night, I tore through the house, drawers, closets, even the attic. But it was gone. Vanished. Then came the bills. Envelopes began arriving in my name, demanding payment for things I had never signed. A $4,800 hospital balance from a clinic I had never stepped foot in. A loan repayment of $12,000 tied to my signature. Only it wasn't my handwriting. I sat at the kitchen table tracing the forged loops of my name, and my chest tightened. When I showed my daughter, she smirked and shook her head. Mom, you're tired. You probably forgot. You signed so many things. I would never sign a loan, I insisted, voice breaking. Then stop worrying. We'll handle it. But her tone was sharp, not comforting, not protective, as though she were tired of me even asking. And then came the whispers. Late one night, I woke to voices drifting down the hall. My bedroom door was cracked open. She won't last long. My son's voice muttered. She's already confused. 1 year, maybe 2. Then the house is ours. My daughter-in-law hissed back. Don't rush it. Keep her calm. Don't let her suspect. My heart stopped. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth to keep from gasping. Were they talking about me, or had I misheard? The next morning, when I asked them what they'd been discussing, they exchanged glances and laughed. Mom, you're paranoid, my son said, patting my arm with mock pity. You're old. Rest. Don't fill your head with nonsense. Don't make a scene, his wife added. I felt the heat rush to my face, shame burning hotter than anger. From that day, the gaslighting became constant. If I misplaced my glasses, they smirked. See? Forgetful again. If I stumbled on the stairs, they whispered, She's frail, losing it. If I asked about the bills or the will, they sighed. She's confused. Best not to stress her. Their words sank into me like poison. Am I paranoid? Am I crazy? I began to doubt myself. Perhaps I really had forgotten signing those papers. Perhaps grief was making me hear things. Perhaps I was just an old woman, rotting away in her own suspicions. But the message on my phone remained. Solid. Real. A thorn in the fog of my mind. The more I tried to ignore it, the more the signs screamed at me. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, I found an opened bank statement tucked beneath the couch cushion. My name was on the joint account, but the balance had shrunk. Nearly $20,000 withdrawn in cash. When I confronted my son, his face darkened. I'm handling things now, Mom. You don't need to worry about money anymore. But it's my account, I cried. Don't raise your voice, he snapped, slamming the folder shut. Dad left things messy. I'm fixing it. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into my hair. My money, my life, my years of scrimping, all vanishing into hands that didn't belong to me. Another time I found prescription bottles in the cabinet, under my name. Medications I had never taken. Strong sedatives. I froze, my fingers tracing the label. Who had filled these? And why? When I asked, my daughter-in-law shrugged. You probably forgot. Doctor said you needed them for sleep. But I hadn't seen a doctor in months. The more they dismissed me, the more I began to unravel. I stopped speaking at meals. My words were either ignored or twisted. I ate in silence, listening to their hushed conversations and the scraping of forks. I began keeping notebooks, scribbling down everything. The dates of the bills, the amounts, the whispers I overheard. Pages and pages of frantic handwriting, proof for myself that I wasn't imagining. But when my son found one, he waved it in the air like a joke. "Look at this. She's writing down conspiracies now." Poor Mom. They laughed, as though my desperation were entertainment. Even the neighbors began to look at me differently. Clara, the woman next door, leaned over the fence one morning and whispered, "Are you all right? I've noticed your son coming and going late at night, and those men with him. They don't look like family." But before I could answer, my daughter-in-law appeared behind me, smiling tightly. "She's fine, Clara. Just a little confused lately. Doctor says it's stress." And Clara, embarrassed, nodded and left. I wanted to scream that it wasn't stress, that I wasn't crazy, that something dark was happening. But the more they painted me as senile, the more people believed them. It all came to a head one night in the kitchen. I found my son rifling through the drawer where I kept old documents. Birth certificates, our marriage license, bank passbooks. "What are you doing?" I demanded. He jumped, then scowled. "Nothing. Go to bed." But when he left, I checked. Papers were missing. The next morning, I asked him. His reply chilled me. "Mom, you shouldn't keep important things. You forget where you put them. Better if I take care of it." I felt the ground shift beneath me. I realized then, they weren't just mocking me. They weren't just whispering. They were erasing me. Slowly, piece by piece. By then, I no longer trusted my own reflection. I would stand at the bathroom mirror, staring at the woman with hollow eyes and silver hair. I whispered to her, "Am I paranoid? Am I crazy?" Sometimes she looked back at me with pity, sometimes with warning. I felt worthless, discarded, as though I were already half buried in the ground with the man they told me was dead. One night I sat alone on the porch, the wind cold against my face. I thought of the decades I had given. Every dollar saved, every meal cooked, every tear swallowed. And for what? To be dismissed as crazy? To be robbed by my own blood? The phone buzzed in my hand. Another message. "Same number, same sender. They will make you disappear. Be careful." My heart stopped, and in that moment I knew. I was not crazy. The nightmare was real, and it was only just beginning. The second message changed everything. They will make you disappear. Be careful. I sat frozen on the porch, the glow of the phone screen burning into my trembling hands. My heart raced so violently I thought it might burst through my chest. The night air felt colder, sharper, like the world itself was warning me. Act now, or be silenced forever. And for the first time, I whispered aloud the thought I had been terrified to believe. "If I'm crazy," I said to the empty yard, "then let me prove it. Let me prove it once and for all." That night, I stopped being a grieving widow and became something else, a detective in my own home. The next morning, I waited until the house was quiet. My son and his wife had gone out, leaving me alone. I went to my husband's office, a room I had avoided for weeks, too full of his scent, his ghost. But grief was no longer my master. Determination was. I opened the desk drawers, rifled through the files, checking every folder, every scrap of paper. At first, nothing. Just dust, receipts, and old manuals. But then, in the back of the bottom drawer, my fingers brushed against something taped beneath the wood. A small black USB drive. My hands shook as I peeled it free. I hurried to the old computer in the corner, plugged it in. A folder appeared on the screen. Accounts. Inside were files, bank records, insurance forms, spreadsheets full of numbers. My breath caught as I scrolled through page after page of transactions. Money moved in and out of accounts I had never known existed. Insurance policies written under my husband's name, with me listed as beneficiary, but altered recently. The handwriting not his, the signatures sloppy forgeries. And then, a document that froze my blood, an application for a second life insurance policy, filed just 6 months before his death. Value, $500,000. Beneficiary, my son, not me. Not the wife of 47 years. My son. My hands covered my mouth to keep the scream inside. But I knew USB files wouldn't be enough. They'd claim I'd misunderstood, or that the files were fake. I needed undeniable proof, so I did something I never thought I would. I bought hidden cameras. It felt strange, walking into that electronics store, pretending to be a frail old woman buying cameras for safety. The young clerk smiled politely, not realizing I was preparing to spy on my own children. That night, while the house slept, I crept through the halls, placing tiny cameras behind picture frames, inside the bookshelf, near the kitchen counter. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped them, but fear gave me steadiness too. The fear of vanishing, without anyone ever knowing the truth. Within days, the cameras caught what my eyes had long suspected. On the third night, I watched my son slip into my room while I slept. He went to the dresser, opened the drawer where I kept my documents, and pulled out papers. He flipped through them, slid some into his pocket, and left. Another night, I caught my daughter-in-law on video, rifling through my purse. She pulled out my checkbook, scribbled quickly, then tucked it back as if nothing had happened. Each clip was another nail in the coffin of their lies. But I needed help. Someone who could see what I couldn't. Someone they couldn't dismiss as crazy old mom. So I called an old friend. His name was Daniel. He had been a police officer once, back when my husband and I were younger. Now retired, he worked as a private investigator. He was one of the last people I trusted, because he had no stake in my life, no piece of my inheritance to chase. When I told him what was happening, he was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Do you realize what you're accusing your own family of?" Tears filled my eyes. I don't want to believe it, but if I don't, they'll destroy me. He agreed to help. Within a week, Daniel uncovered what I had feared. He found the insurance policy records. My husband's signatures forged, the dates suspicious. He traced withdrawals from accounts I hadn't known existed. And worst of all, he discovered a second set of medical records filed under my name. Records that claimed I had been hospitalized twice in the past year for memory loss and paranoia. I had never been hospitalized. They were building a case against me, a paper trail to declare me incompetent, to take everything I had left. Armed with this, I visited a lawyer I had known since my children were little. Mr. Hawkins, an old friend of the family, greeted me kindly, but when I handed him the USB drive and Daniel's findings, his face turned grim. "Mrs. Turner," he said slowly, "I don't know how to tell you this, but..." He pulled out a folder from his cabinet. Inside was a document stamped with official seals, a power of attorney, my name, my husband's name, and my son's signature as guardian. It claimed I had signed over control of all my assets, my house, my accounts, to my son. The signature was mine, but it wasn't mine. The loops were wrong, the slant of the letters unnatural. A forgery. When was this filed? I whispered, voice breaking. 2 weeks before your husband's death. The room spun. 2 weeks before the coffin, before the funeral. They had been planning this long before I even knew what was coming. And then the walls closed in. A letter from the bank arrived, stamped in red. Foreclosure notice. The house would be seized in 2 weeks unless $18,000 was paid. 2 days later, another envelope. A demand for $25,000 in unpaid medical bills. The same false clinic that Daniel had uncovered. I sat at the kitchen table, the papers spread before me, my hands trembling. 2 weeks, $25,000, I had neither, and they knew it. The more I uncovered, the darker it became. Daniel found evidence of prescription purchases under my insurance, medications I had never taken, strong sedatives, even a controlled substance. If you had been given these without your knowledge, he said gravely, it could have killed you. Poison, quiet, invisible, a way to make me vanish without suspicion. And then came the cruelest revelation of all. One evening, Daniel showed up at my door, his face pale. He placed a file on the table and whispered, "You need to see this." Inside were surveillance photos, grainy but clear enough. My husband, alive. He wasn't buried. He wasn't dead. He was living in a rented apartment 2 towns over under a different name. The blood drained from my face. "He staged it," Daniel said. "The death, the funeral. It was all staged. With your son's help. With your daughter-in-law's help. They filed the insurance claim the day after the funeral. $500,000. Already processed." I stared at the photos. My husband's familiar frame, his walk, the set of his shoulders. Alive, alive. While I stood sobbing at his coffin, alive. While my children whispered about my confusion. Alive. While they planned to strip me of everything I had left. I crumpled into the chair, sobs racking my chest. 47 years of marriage. 47 years of sacrifice. And the man I had given my life to had conspired to erase me. The coffin I had wept over. Was it empty? Or filled with someone else's body? I pressed my hands to my face, my voice breaking. Why? Why would he do this? Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. Because greed blinds people, and because they thought you were too weak to fight back. But weakness can be a mask, and betrayal can carve strength where none existed before. That night, I made a vow. If they wanted me gone, if they wanted me erased, I would not go quietly. I would gather every piece of proof. I would expose them all, and I would do it before their deadlines closed the trap around me. As I lay in bed, the house silent around me, I held my phone. The messages were still there. "I am still alive. Trust no one. They will make you disappear. Be careful." Were they from him? From someone warning me? From an ally I didn't know? It didn't matter. The truth was clear now. They thought I was an old woman, paranoid, broken, but they had forgotten. I was also a wife, a mother, a survivor. And a survivor learns to fight hardest when she has nothing left to lose. That night, as I clutched my phone and whispered my vow to fight, I knew the time for silence was over. For weeks they had called me paranoid. For months they had stolen from me, forged my name, poisoned my life. For years they had taken my sacrifices and ground them beneath their greedy heels. But no more. If they wanted to erase me, I would write my story louder than their lies, and I would write it in front of the whole town. Daniel, my private investigator, urged me to take everything we had to court. "It's the only way," he said firmly, spreading the files across my kitchen table. The forged power of attorney, the insurance fraud, the surveillance videos. You have enough to bury them legally. "But will they believe me?" I whispered, clutching my rosary with trembling hands. "They already think I'm old, confused. That's why we let their own words speak for them." He tapped the USB, where the recordings from my hidden cameras waited. A chill went down my spine. My children's voices, their whispers in the night, their laughter at my expense. The evidence was undeniable. And so, with his help, I filed the case. A public hearing. A chance for the truth to step out of the shadows. The courthouse smelled of old wood and dust. Its high ceilings seemed to weigh down on me as I shuffled inside, clutching the folder of evidence like a lifeline. Neighbors filled the benches. Clara from next door sat in the back, her hands folded tightly. People whispered as I entered, some pitying, some skeptical. At the front sat my son and daughter-in-law, their faces masks of smug calm. My daughter, too, though her eyes darted nervously. They believed they would win. After all, hadn't they painted me as senile? Hadn't they convinced everyone that I was paranoid? Unstable. The judge entered, gavel striking. Court is now in session. I took my seat, my knees trembling beneath me. When it was my turn, my lawyer rose. "Your Honor, before anything else, I would like to present recordings taken from the Turner residence. These will speak for themselves." The first clip played. My son's voice. She won't last long. 1 year, maybe 2. Then the house is ours, my daughter-in-law's voice, sharp and gleeful. Don't rush it. Keep her calm. Don't let her suspect. We'll have everything soon. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Heads turned. Neighbors leaned forward, eyes wide. The second clip. My son rifling through my drawers, muttering, "Stupid old woman doesn't even notice half her papers are gone." The third. My daughter-in-law at the kitchen table signing my name onto checks, then laughing softly to herself. Each voice, each word, was a knife cutting through their lies. The smug calm drained from their faces. My son went pale. My daughter-in-law's jaw tightened, eyes darting wildly. Then came the documents. My lawyer spread them before the judge. The forged power of attorney. My faked signature. The insurance policies altered with clumsy handwriting. The fake medical records labeling me as paranoid and incompetent. This, my lawyer said, voice firm, is not the work of care. This is the work of fraud. A calculated plan to strip this woman of her rights, her dignity, and her life savings. I watched the judge's eyes narrow as he scanned the papers. My children shifted uneasily, their whispers sharp, frantic. But the worst was yet to come. Daniel stepped forward, his expression grave. "Your Honor, there is one more piece of evidence." He turned toward the door, and then he walked in. My husband. Alive. The courtroom gasped. Some screamed. A woman dropped her purse to the floor with a thud. I clutched the table, my breath leaving me in a broken sob. There he was. The man I had buried. The man I had mourned. Standing, alive. His face pale but undeniable. The judge's gavel struck furiously. "Order! Order in the court!" My son leapt to his feet. "This is impossible! He's dead!" But the sight was undeniable. Daniel laid down the surveillance photos, the rental records, the proof of his staged death, and my husband at last spoke. His voice was hollow, defeated. "It's true. I'm alive." Gasps again. Whispers filled the air like a storm. The judge's voice cut sharp. "Explain yourself." My husband's eyes met mine for the first time in months, and for a moment I saw shame flicker there. But then he looked away. They convinced me, said it was the only way. The debts were piling up. The insurance would solve everything. They promised you'd be cared for. He gestured weakly toward our children. But my son's voice cracked through. "She was losing it. You know she was. We had no choice. No choice." I rose to my feet, my voice trembling but loud. "No choice but to bury me alive? To steal my home? To poison me?" My words echoed in the silent courtroom. I pointed at my husband. "You swore to love me, to protect me. 47 years of my life I gave you, and you repaid me with betrayal." I turned to my children. "And you, my flesh, my blood. You laughed as you plotted my death. You called me worthless, confused, an obstacle. But I was your mother." My voice broke. Tears streamed down my face, but I stood tall. The silence was suffocating. And then, slowly, applause broke out from the benches. Neighbors, strangers. Clara, with tears in her eyes. Not mocking applause, not pity, but respect. The judge's gavel slammed. "Enough. The evidence is overwhelming. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, attempted murder. Bailiffs! Take them into custody!" The room erupted. My son shouted, struggling as officers grabbed him. "This isn't fair. She's crazy. She doesn't deserve any of it." My daughter-in-law screamed, clawing at the desk, her mask finally breaking. "We had it. We had everything." My daughter buried her face in her hands, sobbing, whispering, "I didn't want this. I didn't." And my husband sank into the bench, head in his hands, the weight of his cowardice pressing him down. As they were led away, the courtroom buzzed with disbelief, pity, and shock. The family everyone thought perfect, shattered, exposed, disgraced. I collapsed back into my chair, sobs shaking my body. 47 years of love, turned to ashes. My children, my blood, revealed as traitors. But through the tears I felt something stronger than grief. Relief. Because I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't worthless. I had uncovered the truth, and I had survived it. When the judge turned to me, his voice softened. "Mrs. Turner, justice will be served. You have shown remarkable strength." Strength. The word rang in my ears. For months they had called me weak, confused, senile. But now, before the whole town, I stood not as a victim, but as the truth-bearer. I looked around at the faces in the benches. Neighbors, friends, strangers. Their eyes no longer full of pity, but respect. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. Before the judge dismissed the hearing, he asked if I wished to make a final statement. I rose on trembling legs, clutching the table for support. My family thought they could bury me alive. I said softly. They thought age made me blind. They thought grief made me weak. They thought lies could erase truth. I raised my chin, tears shining on my cheeks. But the truth always rises, and I am still here. The room was silent. And then, with the sound of chains rattling as my son and daughter-in-law were dragged away, justice was sealed. The day the gavel struck for the last time, I walked out of that courtroom a widow once more. Not the widow of a dead husband, but the widow of a marriage that had already died years before. Long before the coffin, long before the betrayal. My husband's role became clearer in the days that followed. He confessed in signed statements that yes, he had staged his death. Yes, he had done it willingly. But also, yes, he had been pressured by the debts, by our son's promises, by his own cowardice in the face of failure. Better this than bankruptcy, he told investigators. Better this than losing everything. But in choosing that path, he lost the one thing that mattered most. Me. I saw him once more after the trial, when officers escorted him past me in the hallway. His eyes sought mine, desperate, pleading for forgiveness. I turned away. For 47 years I had stood beside him, through sickness, through hunger, through poverty. And when my time came to be protected, he offered me up like a lamb for slaughter. Forgiveness is a gift, and some betrayals are too deep to unwrap. My son and daughter-in-law were sentenced to prison. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted poisoning, each charge stacked like stones on their backs. My daughter, my sweet girl, escaped prison, but not shame. She testified against her brother in exchange for leniency. Her tears on the stand had been real, but they did not erase the nights I heard her whisper with him in the hallway. She chose silence until it served her, and that silence will always sit between us like a locked door. The newspapers carried the story for weeks. Family fraud exposed. Husband stages death for insurance. The photographs of me, clutching my rosary, walking out of court with my chin raised. It became an image everyone in town recognized. Some whispered when I passed by. Others offered me casseroles and hugs. Pity, sympathy, admiration. It all washed over me like waves. But none of it could fill the hollow left by betrayal. The house, the one I had scrubbed and painted, the one I had raised my children in, became unbearable. Its walls echoed with whispers, with laughter at my expense, with lies. I sold it. Some said I was crazy to let it go. "It's worth so much, Mrs. Turner," the realtor insisted. "It's your legacy." But legacies are not bricks. They are not beams or shingles. They are the truth we leave behind, the strength we carry forward. And those walls carried too much rot. So I packed my belongings. The photos that still meant something. My grandmother's quilt, the rosary I had clutched in court. And I left. I bought a small cottage at the edge of town. Just 2 rooms, a tiny garden, the kind of place most would overlook. But to me it was a palace, because it was mine, because it was free of lies. In the months that followed, I found something I never expected at my age. a chosen family. Clara, my neighbor, visited me often. She brought tea, warm bread, and stories of her own heartbreaks. She never once called me crazy. She never once doubted my memory. Daniel, the investigator, became a regular guest. Sometimes we spoke of the case, but more often we sat on the porch in silence, watching the sunset. Two old souls who had seen too much, content simply to sit and breathe. And the church ladies, the ones who once whispered about me, now embraced me with a respect I had never known. "You're stronger than all of us," one said, pressing my hand after service. No, I thought, not stronger, just unwilling to die in silence. There are nights when I still wake in a sweat, hearing my son's voice whispering, "She won't last long." There are days when I see my husband's face in the crowd, alive, as though the trial had been another dream. The wounds are deep. They will not vanish, but I am not broken. Each morning I water the flowers in my little garden. I watch them rise from soil, fragile stems defying storms. And I see myself in them, old, perhaps bent, but not destroyed. Because old age is not weakness. It is survival. It is wisdom carved from pain. My family tried to erase me, to write me off as senile, paranoid, useless. But here I am, my story carved into the town's memory, into the pages of the court, into the hearts of strangers who now look at me with respect. And sometimes, when the sun sets and the garden glows gold, I whisper to myself, "You survived. You endured. You lived to tell." I may have lost the family I once loved, but I gained something greater, the truth. And truth is the only inheritance worth leaving behind. My story is not just mine. It belongs to every woman told she is paranoid, every elder dismissed as useless, every heart betrayed by blood. I live to prove that even when the world calls you crazy, even when your own family digs your grave, you can still rise. So when people ask me now, "Do you regret it? Exposing them? Standing alone?" I smile softly. No, because I am not alone. Not anymore. I have Clara. I have Daniel. I have my neighbors. I have myself. And for the first time in decades, that is enough as I sit now in my little cottage, watching the garden sway in the evening breeze. I understand something I never did in all those years of sacrifice. True family is not always blood. True family is those who stand with you in truth, those who hold your hand, not the knife behind your back. I told you my story because silence almost killed me. And maybe, somewhere out there, someone listening is being silenced too. So tell me, my dears, what would you have done in my place? Would you forgive, or would you fight? Share your thoughts with me in the comments below. And if my story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay safe, my dears. Stay wise. Stay strong.